and this is a short podcast series that we are creating in collaboration with Mariana Radisic Koliren, the founder of the tour operator Lunfarda Travel, and some of the local tour guides Julia, Rodrigo and Esteban. Here are some short facts about Lunfarda Travel. It's based in the heart of San Telmo, the oldest suburb of Buenos Aires, Argentina. The company was founded in 2019 by Mariana, a Jewish, queer, Argentinian, self-made power woman who's leading it by the principles of equality, empowerment, intersectionality, through thriving with diversity, working together with different communities. Today's episode, and our first episode, is with Mariana herself, and we're going to talk about her story, how she founded Lunfarda Travel, what are her inspirations, and many more things. So let's get started. Hi Mariana, it's so nice to have you here. I'm excited to hear all about you and your company. How are you?
I'm great, and it's really nice to hear your voice and see you, even though we're far from each other in the world, we're close in this podcast.
Yes, I absolutely agree, because I'm actually in Amsterdam and we're recording with you in Buenos Aires. So, shall we get started?
Yes, let's dive into it.
Okay, so first of all, I'm very curious if you can tell us how everything started and tell us a bit about the story of Lunfarda Travel.
Well, it's a pretty crazy story and a lot has happened, so I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet. I'm a tour guide by trade. I've been guiding in Buenos Aires for about 10 years. And around 2018, I started realizing that there were so many untapped stories in Buenos Aires, so many communities who have very important stories, very constitutive of what Argentinity and what our peoplehood is. And yet, when you would go on tours, you would never hear about these stories. Stories like the LGBT story or the queer history story. Myself, being Jewish, I didn't see much of that going on. So I started developing my own tours, and eventually I got fed up with not seeing the change that I wanted to see from my bosses. So I decided I should go on and open my own travel agency. So in 2019, I launched my travel agency with some colleagues of mine. And just about 6 months after that, the most devastating pandemic and the worst time of our industry came forth. But I persevered. I surrounded myself with really talented and diverse people who have amazing stories to share. And we've been, going hard at it, developing new tours and trying to diversify the voices that you hear in the travel industry in Argentina. And now it's been about a year and a half since the country has reopened and our company is growing exponentially. And I think this is a testament to how much this diversity was needed in the travel industry.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. You said you told a little bit about your experience with previous employers, that they just restricted you and you were bored with the normal mass tourism that they stayed with and that they sticked with, but you saw a lot more potential. So you already mentioned a few things, but in a short summary, what does the company Lunfarda Travel actually represent?
So I define Lunfarda Travel as the first travel agency in the world that is an intersectional travel agency. So through intersectionality, we address the different identities of people and how those identities mix and overlap, sometimes creating, discrimination. Sometimes a community might be very numerous in a community, but they are not represented in politics or in power or in the stories that we share. And some other communities might be completely overrepresented. What I wanted to see is how these different identities intersect to create Argentine society and to be able to bring light as many of these communities that I could. But I also wanted to do this in a respectful way with these communities and, help travel become a gateway for prosperity, for employment, for visibility of stories. So I basically created a new method of designing travel experiences through the scope of intersectionality. So this is a travel agency, but it's also a bit of an experimental lab where we are toying around with these ideas. And we've also been showing that beyond our ethical responsibility to share these stories, which I think is the main reason why we do it anyways, there's also an economic part of it. Travel companies can thrive economically by becoming more diverse and by becoming invested in their own communities. And I wanted to show that there are other ways in which we can run travel agencies that are not so much about taking a picture and showing it to the guests, but really making them dive into the diverse complexities and sometimes even contradictions that a community can have.
Yeah, you actually told us now that you're driving your business with an intersectional approach, and I mean, I know it, I've experienced it because I actually was an intern at your company for half a year. But for all the other people out there that are maybe not so familiar with the term, like, can you please explain a bit more what is intersectionality?
So intersectionality is an analytical framework, so you can think about so many different things through intersectionality. So intersectionality is a framework in which you take the identities of people, like for example, I am a cisgender woman, I'm queer, I'm Jewish, and all of these things, they kind of determine how the society is going to relate with me and how I am going to relate with society and with other peers. So using intersectionality in tourism is basically looking at that. If there is a society, what points are we highlighting? What points are we not highlighting? Are we maybe not highlighting this point because there is a systemic invisibilization of this part of the collective? By really kind of addressing the dynamics in which different identities interact, you can also establish how this power creates more or less opportunities for these communities. Personally, I am of the idea that everyone has great stories to share and that every community has value of its own. So by looking at my own community, the Argentine community, which is really diverse, I identified that we were always talking about the white European experience of Argentina, especially the European experience that has to do with the Italians and the Spaniards and the French. But then there were so many different stories that were not, a part of the storytelling that we do in tourism, but it's definitely part of the society that we live in. So what I wanted to do through the scope of intersectionality is kind of reach out to these communities and find ways in which they can not just be represented, but be agents in their own voice by representing themselves.
Okay, yeah, so it's all about having a wider angle and acknowledging everyone and listening to everyone and what everyone has to tell in their story. And I know that you also created actually an intersectional travel movement.
Yes. Well, not to toot my own horn, but I will a little bit. Last year I got a fellowship by IGLTA, which is the world's largest international gay and lesbian travel association, and they sponsored me to really kind of like fast track my professional career, and I decided to take that opportunity to create the intersectional travel movement, as you very well said, which is basically me going to other people in the industry and saying, hey, like, I don't have $1 million budget for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm just a small company and was founded by a single person. So there is a model in which every travel agency around the world can be more invested in their own communities, in which they can reach out to members of their communities that are not being represented in the travel industry. And what I wanted to create was a sort of blueprint in which travel agents and travel designers who might be interested in diversifying their stories, but they don't even know where to begin with. Okay, so here's the blueprint, here's how you do it, here's how you address a community that you're not a part of to help them develop a travel business for that community in particular. And if anyone's interested, you can go to intersectionaltravelmovement.org and you can download this manual on how to basically create new products through the scope of intersectionality. And then this is an open call for debate and for an open conversation. This is a very, very new thing. We're just inventing it as we go. And so I think it's going to be a great idea for people to start talking about it, collaborating, exchanging ideas, criticizing each other so we can create a new way of doing travel, because I think we're certainly past due for creating better standards for the travel industry.
So shout out to all the tourism businesses that are interested in applying this model. Of course, you should go to the website. We put it in the link as well. And apart from taking an intersectional approach, what do you think has to change in tourism?
Well, I think that beyond sharing more diverse stories, which is definitely something that we need to do, we need to diversify the kind of people that you see inside of the travel industry. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a summit of our local chamber of tourism in Argentina. There were 37 people, and about 34 of them were white men. So we are certainly talking a lot about diversity, but we need to see that diversity in the positions of power within our own organizations. I think we're still going to have a lot of work to do until we sit on a table of decision making and we see a bunch of different people collaborating together. Even in my own company, like I try to have people from different ages, different backgrounds, because I have my own experience, and when I take decisions, when I think about things, I always think from my own experience. But when you have people that have different issues, where they have different goals or ambitions, that's where we can really exchange ideas and find more respectful ways of doing travel.
Yeah, I mean, there is still quite a bit to go, but also going step by step, and I'm optimistic. Everyone is doing their part, and hearing and seeing what you do. I'm excited for the future. I was reading this interview with Retravel with you recently, and you said collaboration over competition, acknowledgement over egos. I think that is exactly what we need in this world right now. People that want to share their ideas and concepts rather than hide them from competition. Um, but I'm just curious, what made you think like this? Like, where do you get your inspiration from?
Well, I think that as a woman, as a cisgender woman, I had to work so many times under male bosses, and also as a Latina person representing my own community. Most of my bosses were foreigners, and it always felt so weird that I wouldn't be able to empower my own voice when talking about my own history and my own community. I think we need to listen to each other's experiences, because my experience might not be the same as yours, but that doesn't make my experience or yours less valid. It means that we have to meet each other in the middle. I always find that those companies that don't really have a mindset of collaborating, or where ideas flow very vertically instead of horizontally, they tend to become very stagnant. Many of the ideas that I run today in my own business, these were all ideas that I actually went to my bosses and said, hey, let's do this at some point. And they always told me that there was either no market or no interest, or that it wasn't a priority for the company. And maybe in a very concrete example, I would say, hey, as a queer person, I want to know how Argentina became such a friendly place. And they're like, well, there's not a market for that. Well, now that I have my own company, I can tell you, not only is there a market for that, but for people who are part of a community that isn't really represented in travel, when you get to go on a tour being a queer person, and you get your tour guide, as a queer person, telling you about their own stories, it's so much more powerful. People see themselves represented in travel. They can imagine themselves in other positions, in other industries. The ripple effects and all of the ways in which collaboration creates a virtuous environment, I think it's fantastic. I think there's so much we need to get done in this industry, and there's no way that just one person can be like, yes, I'm the authority and I'm going to do everything. Now, we need to listen to each other to create things.
Yeah, I think it's so important in general to widen your view, and also, yeah, get out of your bubble and listen to actually what other people have to say, not just see it through your eyes, but try to get a wider perspective. And yeah, it's nice to see that if you believe enough in yourself, like you did, you can actually make this work, and you saw something in it that your bosses didn't. And now you have your own travel company, and it's going well. So I'm I'm wondering, how do you include these principles in your products, or can you tell us in general a bit more about the products that you offer at Lunfarda Travel?
Absolutely. So I want to tell you about two new products that we're designing and hopefully launching later this year. So one of them is a tour that is actually a vegan tour. So one of the things that we always think when we think about intersectionality is how so many different things intersect, and how not just the identities but the needs of people intersect as well. So of course there is a very big movement of vegetarians and vegans in Argentina, which for those of you who don't know is a country that has a very big culture surrounding meat eating. Our most important national dish is asado, which is an array of a bunch of different meats cooked on embers. So certainly ditching meat is a big thing for Argentines, and it also creates a bit of a problem for people who are vegan and want to come to Argentina, which is how can you experience a culture when the food of that culture is completely unavailable to your own standards? So we've been actually researching with you, Jana, last year some of the restaurants in this city that are creating Argentine food but revisited through the scope of veganism. So maybe you can eat fresco y dulce, which is a traditional dessert, which involves cheese but with a vegan cheese, and we're trying to find ways to make Argentine traditional gastronomy accessible for people who follow vegan diets. And I think it's also part of intersectionality, although it wouldn't be one of the things that you would use as a first guess when you talk about that. Another thing that we're creating and launching later this year is a walking tour that is around contemporary art in Argentina. So we're obviously all about supporting the immense talent of local artists here, but we're also very knowledgeable about how sometimes people have ideas about things. So I've heard so many people saying about contemporary art, either I could do this, or I don't like it, or I don't get it. And I wanted to help people find a more playful way of understanding contemporary art so that they're not intimidated by it or they don't feel like it's like a children's game. So we're actually designing a tour that is more centered on creating questions about art than being like, oh, this is a painting that was done at some time by this person, which of course we are going to have a little bit of that, but it's more about creating a playful experience surrounding interpretation of art. And in this tour, we're going to be visiting the Museum of Modern Art. We're going to visit art galleries to check out some of the art that is being done today by local artists. We're going to put a big emphasis on how these artists deal with Latino identity. So that's going to be a big part of our tour, is how our identity is explored through contemporary art. And we're also going to check out some really cool street art. And we're going to visit the workshop of Julian Bernatene, who's an amazing artist from our own community here in San Telmo. So that's kind of how I design tours in Lunfarda. I try to find things that combine, pushing money and pushing people into places where local talent is, creating moments where people can reflect and think in new ways about topics that they might already have an idea about. And of course, having a lot of fun, eating great food, and getting plenty of Instagram-worthy shots so that you can get your friends inspired to come to Argentina after you.
Yeah, so I see and I know it's all about opening new doors, even if for some Argentinians it might be crazy to open the vegan door. But hey, the market is still there, so it's not impossible.
I think vegans are kind of crazy, but I love them and I respect them anyways, so.
Yeah, I know you do. But actually, cutting back to a subject that you've mentioned before, you founded the company in 2019, just before the COVID outbreak, and now the company is thriving and still alive more than ever. How did you manage that? What challenges were you exposed as a startup?
Well, it was hard no matter how you look at it. I had just founded my company and I had spent pretty much my entire life savings in it. I had worked for many years as a tour guide and I would save every tip that I would get to fund my own company. So obviously when I created my company and within 6 months, I had to close down and I didn't even know when I could even start to work again. It was very, sad and devastating, and it created basically a lot of fear. But I had basically two choices at that time. Either I said, that's it for my dream, it's gone, I'll, teach English online or whatever. But I had a vision and I wanted to really change things. And I think that was a huge driver. I wasn't in it for the money. I really actually wanted to see some different things happening in the industry. So I actually met, for example, Julia. You're going to have another episode with her. She leads the Black History Tour. We started talking while we were both in lockdown in our houses. I called her through WhatsApp and I told her hey, I think we should do a Black History Tour, but I'm a white person, so I can't be the one to do it. And many of the ideas for many of the tours actually were developed during the pandemic. I said, what, if I'm going to be stuck in my house for, God knows how long, might as well research, might as well develop, because one day this country is going to reopen. People love to travel, people will travel again. And when they do, I want them to be able to find better things than what we were able to offer before COVID started. And it was a huge gamble. I had to personally get into about $20,000 of debt, which was really, really scary, especially in a country like Argentina, where getting into debt is really, really high risk. But my vision was so on spot, and the work of my colleagues was just like they got it so right from the beginning that I was able to pay my entire debt in 1 year of operations, which is completely massive. I know many businesses who spend 3 to 5 years to cancel their debts. Today, we're not only a debt-free company, but we have so many different projects. We're continuously hiring people, growing, and getting more recognition for what we do. And I think as we gain all of that, it also empowers us to be more vocal and to tell other companies to, look at us. Like, we did all of this as a company that was almost dead when it was born. So why can't you do it? You have more money, you have more resources. There really is no excuse to not do the work. So hopefully that's what people are going to get from our story.
Yeah, first of all, congrats for already paying off all your debts. That's amazing within 1 year. And I think you also did some virtual online tours that also helped you throughout the time, and you used your creativity to get through, like using the time useful, which is, I think, a nice example to see for other businesses. It doesn't matter even if it's in tourism or not, how you can always find your way around with amazing creative ideas and amazing creative people. So I think everyone should always keep that in mind. Are there any challenges you're facing right now?
I think that right now our challenge is mostly getting more people to come on board on this vision for tourism that we have. We're definitely on the right track as a company. We are continuing to grow. We're continuing to develop new tours, and we're definitely past that very scary time where we didn't even know whether there would be a company in a year. Now I'm very certain that Lunfarda is going to be here in 1, 5, 10 years, as many as we'd like. But what I want is to see broader change enacted in the industry. I specifically want to see in Buenos Aires more companies putting in the work. And I think that takes time, it takes political power. So now I think the next goal is how to take this initiative, which is very small. We're like a very small tour operator in a country that is not one of the largest touristic countries in the world. How can we make this into an international movement to transform even more lives? I think that's the big challenge as we speak.
Speaking of which, if you were to give any advice to a future tourism business owner, what would it be?
First of all, believe in your own gut and in your own ideas. In this industry, there are many people who have been working for a long time, and they think that the way that they have always done things is the way of doing things. I believe this is not the case. I think that if you have ideas, test them, run them through your friends, and try them out. Many of the times you will find that people say that your idea is not possible, and then when you go on and you enact it, it wasn't just possible, but it can create a new way of doing things. So my first recommendation is like, I know it sounds very cheesy and it sounds very corny, but believe in your own power and don't let anyone take that power from you. Reach out to people who feel the same way as you do, and if you're finding no's elsewhere, get together, create a tribe, and make a tribe to create those no's and turn them into yeses. I know for a fact that there are lots of people, especially young people, who come with ideas regarding sustainability and social justice and racial justice that really are desperate to see these changes in this industry, but they won't find those changes enacted by the people who have power. So let's strategize so that we can get into those positions of power, because that's the way that we're actually going to get things done.
That's great, and I know what I've taken from my internship at Lunfarda is also to try and try and try, like you said already, try out and make mistakes and improve things and just believe in yourself. I think it's the mindset that we are all needing, especially in these times. But looking at the future, what are your goals for Lunfarda in terms of expanding or reaching new audience, or in general, what is it that you want to reach next?
Well, I definitely want people to, especially in the travel industry, to know what Lunfarda is and to be aware of what we propose and what we bring to the table. They might agree with it, they might disagree with it, but I think everyone should be at least exposed to new ideas of how to conduct business. And my dream is that one day I can travel to any part of the world and find businesses that have this kind of model. And I want to see companies like really bring in like hard data, like how did this company go into this community? How many jobs did it create in this community? How did it benefit this community? I want to see travel companies not just, showcasing culture and profiting of culture. I want to see travel companies being active agents in the protection of culture and in the promotion of culture. And especially I want to see travel agencies understand that we have a responsibility. We communicate for our places, and we are the ones who are ambassadors to the place that we are in. So it is our responsibility not just to represent accurately the diversity of our own communities, but it is also our responsibility to help people from other parts of the world gain an understanding that diversity is one of the strongest assets that we have as a humankind, honestly. There are so many people who have prejudices and ideas that are not so great about another culture, and when they go and they immerse themselves in that culture, it transforms them, and their money transforms that place for the good. So if we can really be mindful and aware of this power that tourism has, I think we can harness it in a much more effective way to promote agendas of, equity all over the world.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think also, especially in tourism, we now have the possibility to preserve cultures and to enforce local community and do all of that through tourism. And I think that shift is a great opportunity, but also very necessary. Thank you so much for the insightful and interesting conversation we had today. We got to find out quite some facts about Lunfarda, and also about your inspirations and your mindset. Obviously, you can check out all the products on the website. And for everyone else out there, keep in mind that Lunfarda Travel is working together on building equality, diversity and empowerment in tourism through an intersectional approach by working together with underserved communities. They're striving for accurate self-representation by sharing and letting them share their stories. 10% of the profit generated by the tours is donated or contributed to organizations in local communities. And if you want to support Lunfarda Travel with that, you can book a tour directly through the website lunfardatravel.com or write an email at hello@lunfardatravel.com. I will leave the link in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and please, if you liked our podcast, feel free to share it on social media and link us. We're always happy to spread the word, and if you have some feedback, comments, or new inspirations, you can write to us or find us on Instagram under Lunfarda Travel. Once again, thank you so much, Mariana, for having this conversation with me today. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your commitment to creating spaces to talk about diversity in travel. It's been really amazing to have you here hosting me in this podcast you've created, and I hope to see all of the things that you're going to do in this industry.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks, Mariana. It's a pleasure.